but they didn't know just how extensive their program was. So as a precautionary measure during the war, about 150,000 U.S. service members were vaccinated against anthrax, and more would have been immunized if the war hadn't ended so quickly.
Dr. Kano lies again here when she said that prior to the Gulf War, the intelligence community suspected the Iraqis had done research on anthrax. This is a lie, because the intelligence community did not suspect this. They absolutely knew it. How did they know? Because the U.S. Commerce Department licensed the transfer of the anthrax to Iraq by the American Type Culture Collection, a company shown here, and a copy of Senator Don Riegel's Congressional Investigation Report of 1995. Listed here are just a few of the many varieties of biological weapons shipped to Saddam Hussein during the 1980s. So all that controversy about the CIA providing false intelligence about the Iraqis developing weapons of mass destruction is hereby shown to be a fraud and cover-up.
Active chemical munitions bunkers, mobile production facilities.
We know he's got chemical weapons. He's got them. He's got them. He's got them.
He has not developed any significant capability with respect to weapons of mass destruction. He is unable to project conventional power against his neighbors.
We are able to keep arms from him. His military forces have not been rebuilt.
You get told things every day that don't happen. It doesn't seem to bother people.
In fact, every member of Congress knows quite well that the CIA's intelligence was accurate. They are obviously avoiding self-incriminating discussion about this evidence proving an American-based, multinational, corporate-controlled organization shipped Saddam Hussein all these weapons as published in the United States Congressional Record. These pages of war provisions clearly prove the profitable supply of deadly germs sent to three places: the Iraq Atomic Energy Commission, the Ministry of Higher Education, and the Ministry of Trade. More evidence of malfeasance comes from the Qamishiyya weapons arsenal in Iraq. Saddam Hussein's army did have biological and chemical weapons of mass destruction that were shipped from the heartland of America.
I never received, before, during, or after hostilities, any report of Iraqi use of chemical weapons, nor the discovery of or destruction of Iraqi chemical weapons.
However, a little bit later in his testimony, General Schwarzkopf apparently contradicted himself when he said the following.
I remember General Franks came to me, and I assume it was Qamishiyya he was talking about at the time, because it was about the same time frame, and talked about this huge ammunition dump that they had found with literally tons and tons and tons of ammunition in it, and there was no way they could possibly retrograde it, and I challenged him on that, and he convinced me that no, they couldn't retrograde it, and therefore they were going to destroy it in place. I said, fine. Now that's Qamishiyya. From what I heard about the size of the bunker that Franks was talking about and the others that they blew up, these were huge bunkers with crates and crates and crates and crates of ammunition in them, and I can only assume that they either didn't recognize them or didn't see them at the time.
I'm Dan Topolsky. I was the Nuclear, Biological, and Chemical Defense NCO for B Company, 37th Engineer Battalion. I was on the Qamishiyya Bunker Complex mission.
Sergeant Topolsky was one of the nuclear, biological, and chemical non-commissioned officers in charge of identifying munitions at the Qamishiyya Bunker Complex in Iraq. This complex consisted of over 100 bunkers and 49 warehouses, each the size of a football field. And he feels that he and his men were exposed to chemical and biologicals when they were ordered to blow it up. Here's how he felt when he entered this complex.
I felt betrayed. I felt like we had been sold out for dollars when I saw what I saw inside those bunkers.
Why would Sergeant Topolsky feel betrayed? What was it that he saw when he and the others from the 37th Engineer Battalion entered those bunkers? General Schwarzkopf discussed how the enemy identifies their munitions in his testimony when he said the following.
Even though I had 40-some years in military service, if you were to bring in a bunch of ammunition and pile it up in front of me, and one of them was a 122-millimeter rocket with chemicals in it, I would not be able to tell you that that had chemicals in it, particularly if it was an Iraqi rocket with Arabic writing on it or something of the sort. We identify ours when we had them, in a very specific way by color coding. I don't have the slightest idea what the Arabs did.
General Schwarzkopf stated that we identified ours when we had them by color coding. As you can see, the colored bands on these munitions indicate that there were chemical and biological munitions inside these bunkers at Camisea. According to Sergeant Topolsky, the yellow or purple bands indicate chemical munitions, where the green bands indicate biological munitions. Schwarzkopf also indicated that he could not identify munitions, particularly if they had Iraqi markings on them. He'll also note that the markings on these munitions are plainly written in English, and they indicated that these munitions were supplied to Iraq by countries like Jordan, Middlesex, England, the Soviet Union or Russia, as well as the United States of America. According to the 1972 Geneva Convention, weapons of mass destruction are illegal. Therefore, according to Sergeant Dan Topolsky, it is very likely that these munitions were destroyed not so much to prevent Saddam Hussein from regaining control of them, but rather to destroy the evidence of these countries breaking international law.
This footage was widely distributed by Gulf War Veterans Association President Joyce Riley, a nurse and captain in the reserves at that time, who published it for the world to see to help stop the killing. Captain Riley, who was never biologically or chemically exposed to fallout during the Gulf War, is certain she was infected when forced to take the anthrax vaccination. The anthrax vaccine given to all of our troops and allies, except for French soldiers, was poisonously prepared and deadly to receive. Let's listen again to Dr. Kano, to what she has to say about this vaccination business.
As a precautionary measure during the war, about 150,000 U.S. service members were vaccinated against anthrax, and more would have been immunized if the war hadn't ended so quickly.
These numbers are plainly wrong. There were hundreds of thousands more Americans victimized by the vaccines. Numerous experts have now linked the anthrax vaccine to hundreds of thousands of deaths and a currently advancing plague that emerged exclusively from the Gulf War called Gulf War Syndrome. The Senate thoroughly investigated this subject in 1994 and published proof that our troops were unwittingly used experimentally or alternatively targeted for disease and death by the vaccine makers with official political consent. Spreading across America and the world now is a flu-like illness that resists standard medical treatments. You probably know people suffering with severe recurring respiratory ailments. Experts have linked to an agent called mycoplasma. In fact, chronic fatigue, low body temperature, and a flu that keeps coming back is associated with this germ isolated and patented by the United States Armed Forces Institute of Pathology in a patent shown here. This agent, mycoplasma, apparently contaminated the anthrax vaccine given to more than 500,000 American troops that served in the first Gulf War. Dr. Kano from the Centers for Disease Control applauds this invention. This next government document was obtained by lawyers for the victims I just described. Here you can see the array of biological weapons being tested on the prisoners in Texas as overseen by Baylor College of Medicine. Baylor, at that time, boasted having George H.W. Bush serving on their board of directors. The dates listed here also coincide with the alleged transition of America's offensive biowarfare program to defensive. Notice the mycoplasma. Both defensive and offensive studies were conducted, a vaccine study and a hall study, in which prisoners were actually exposed to this airborne agent in a meeting hall. According to congressional testimony by one of the nation's leading experts in mycoplasma and Gulf War syndrome as it relates to mycoplasma-contaminated vaccines, Dr. Garth Nicholson, these Texas studies linked to Baylor College of Medicine as well as the privately owned biotech company called Tanox Biosystems of Houston, a company, incredibly, co-owned by James Baker III, the man charged with overseeing the president's Florida vote recount that secured his heavily contested election. Here's a copy of Dr. Nicholson's letter to an investigating official. It reads, quote,